Taken over a lot of American manufacturing, such as automobiles and steel.
Japan bashing. Were we just plain wrong?
Having watched the recession, having watched the Japanese really struggle, they don't look so invincible anymore.
Tonight, images of Japan.
This is ABC News Nightline. Substituting for Ted Koppel and reporting from Washington, Cokie Roberts.
Remember the Reagan campaign ads about the bear in the woods? That bear represented the enemy, the military might of the Soviet Union. Then, as the Soviet threat lessened, we replaced it with a new foe, Japan. American fear of Japanese economic power has served as the backdrop for recent meetings between the leaders of the U.S. and Japan. But as President Clinton arrives in Tokyo early tomorrow morning, there's evidence American attitudes have changed. 3 years ago, the ABC polling unit asked the question, do you think Japan's current economic strength poses a threat to the United States or not? A majority, 55%, said yes, 40% said no. But in a new ABC poll taken for Nightline and released tonight, those numbers are reversed. 40% see Japan as a threat, 56% do not. That's a significant shift in a relatively short period of time, and it comes despite what some experts see as a steady diet of negative pictures of Japan. Nightline correspondent Chris Bury takes a look at changing American attitudes on the eve of the president's visit.
Air raid Pearl Harbor.
What is Japan's real place in the American mind? What images flicker across our television and movie screens? Is our picture of Japan distorted by the media's favorite metaphor?
The metaphor is put together as simply as this. In 1941, they took away our lives. In 1981, they took away our livelihoods.
Robert Deutsch is an anthropologist who studies how images shape public opinion. He was hired by Japan's foreign ministry to examine American attitudes towards Japan.
The entire image structure in the American mind of Japan is a metaphor that links World War II, specifically Pearl Harbor, with present-day commerce, such that everything Japan does is open to the possibility of being perceived as invasion, as taking over, as evil.
In videotaped interviews with 300 people in focus groups conducted around the country, Deutsch found Americans repeatedly describing the Japanese in terms of war.
The war didn't end when it was over because the Japanese went to work and started winning the war.
Winning the war.
With their Toyotas and so forth.
With the influence of the products and their ability to come into our market and maybe eventually control it, we'll all be going Japanese.
And what I heard was a sad story. It was a story told by Americans about themselves, which is, we were once in an economic war with Japan that is now over, and we lost.
Yet Americans are ambivalent. They find much to like in the Japanese: hard work, efficiency, team spirit. But in the focus groups, those feelings are often combined with a strong sense of loss.
The industrial Japan is more of what my picture of America in the 50s was, where it was, you know, mom and pop and the front porch and everything. And I know they work a lot of hours, and they, especially the husbands, don't have a big family life. But to me, it seemed like they're where we were in the 1950s.
The images are so powerful, Deutsch says, that not even hard facts can get in the way.
I give people data, for example, about from U.S. labor statistics to show that we're more productive by industry than most industries in Japan. People say to me, that's a lie.
So what accounts for such a distorted picture?
まもなく45回でございます。
Jesus. If an elevator's going to talk, it should speak in American.
Deutsch claims negative stereotypes are pervasive, not just in the heavy-handed Hollywood way, but even in subtle scenes that have nothing to do with Japan, and in the imagery of advertising, like this 1988 Doritos ad.
You won't find a chip like this coming out of Japan.
Deutsch is far less critical of Hollywood and Madison Avenue than he is of network news. In studying more than 10 years' worth of nightly news reports from 1983 to 1995, Deutsch found an exaggerated emphasis on the Japanese as conquerors.
Commerce Secretary Baldridge arrived in Tokyo to ask the Japanese to remove barriers against U.S. exports. In World War II, we conquered Japan. Today, we petition it.
Some people believe that if the current trends continue, the Statue of Liberty will be holding a Sony aloft instead of the Torch of Liberty.
Peter Jennings, for example, uses a word in a story about exportation of American apples to Japan.
Japanese farmers and their accomplices in government had thrown up every roadblock imaginable over the years.
Not officials in government, but accomplices in government. The only connotation that Americans have of the word accomplice is criminal and conspiratorial, period.
The media may have exaggerated the Japanese threat, but like many myths, the story of Japan as an economic Godzilla has some basis in fact, according to Japan scholar Robert Morse.
We started to get sloppy and less competitive, and the Japanese broke through that trade barrier. And those two things coincided in the late 80s and early 90s. And that created the friction, the tension, the conflict.
Every culture has its monsters, and it has its demons, and it has its saints. And the Japanese have served as a kind of a demonic threat for economic purposes to us. I think we have these fears. The Japanese have been very useful.
They stimulated our competitiveness. They challenged the auto industry, which was not advancing. They've raised the whole quality of our electronic life, our automobile life. And so, in many ways, the Japanese did us a great service because we were getting lazy.
Indeed, recent images and headlines have turned the myth of an all-powerful Japan on its head.
After 6 years of recession in Japan and 6 years of competitive recovery in America, I don't think we have that fear anymore.
T.R. Reid is a longtime Tokyo correspondent for the Washington Post.
Now, having watched the recession, having watched the Japanese really struggle, they don't look so invincible anymore. They don't look unstoppable. And so I think the coverage, the color of the coverage has changed.
Aren't American attitudes about Japan really changing, and aren't they really a product of the times?
No. Simply put, no. This is how it goes. Once you have created this mythology over years and decades, it's very hard to change.
But mythologies do change. Russia is no longer seen as the Soviet bear, and as President Clinton visits Asia this week, Americans are already sizing up the new demon in the neighborhood, China. This is Chris Bury for Nightline in Washington.
When we return, 3 experts on U.S.-Japan relations will try to explain what happened to the bad old Japan.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield.
All great cars are built from the ground up. But to build something truly extraordinary, we had to dig a little deeper. Introducing the new Acura CL Coupe. Further proof that luxury doesn't have to be boring.
What if I burn myself? What if the pole breaks?
What if this guy throws a left when I'm expecting a right?
What if I hit my head on the backboard?
What if something happens to my little girl?
What if there were a healthcare organization that covered the U.S. Olympic team? So the only thing our athletes would have to worry about is pursuing their dreams.
What if I fall off the platform?
What if you didn't have to worry about healthcare? Blue Cross, Blue Shield.
Tomorrow, if you could find out that you were at risk for a terrible disease, would you want to know? Genetic screening can tell you. But is it a curse or a blessing? Watch and you'll understand on ABC's World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Whether you're a longtime Seattle native, new to the area, a visitor, or you know someone who's thinking of moving, you need Step 1 to Seattle and vicinity. This 30-minute videotape and booklet are packed with information that allows you to compare different areas of Greater Seattle by home and apartment styles, school districts, commutes, recreational opportunities, crime data, and more. Purchase KOMO TV's Step 1 to Seattle and receive an April edition of Seattle, the magazine for the Pacific Northwest. To order, call this toll-free number.
12 hours Thursday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Bonded Furniture Liquidators opens the doors to 2 former Smith's Home Furnishings locations, Delta Park in Portland and Park 217 in Tiger, for a wall-to-wall $2 million new furniture liquidation. Warehouses of prime furniture inventory from leading manufacturers like Douglas, Universal, Leonetti, Singer, Klausner, and many more will be offered to the public for immediate sale. Oak roll top desks, leather sofas, hundreds of mattress sets, all sizes. Entertainment centers, bookcases, dining and bedroom sets will be clearly marked and sold Thursday between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. Liquidation being conducted by Bonded Furniture Liquidators Thursday, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Joining us from Boston, Ezra Vogel is a professor at Harvard and the former chief analyst on East Asia affairs at the National Intelligence Council. Yossi Sarumi is a professor at the City University of New York. He joins us from our New York studio. And here in Washington, George Packard is a professor of East Asian Studies at Johns Hopkins University. Starting with you, Mr. Sarumi, that analysis that we've just seen of the Japanese as the big bad enemy, is that your experience here?
Indeed, it has been my experience, and there was a strong, very, very distinct, great divide about the Americans' perception of Japan up until about 1989 or 90, until the crumbling of Berlin Wall, disappearance of Soviet Union. The United States continued to think the Soviet Union as a #1 political and military threat, and Japan as a technological and economic, maybe competitor, but its allies. They needed Japan to fight the communist Soviet Union. That kind of restraint disappeared after the...
But do you think it disappeared because of media images and all of those things
media
we just saw?
Media image as well. The Gorbachev became the kind of just the now saint and angel, and Japanese prime ministers, generation after generation, has been bad ones. And that kind of perception obviously fueled and hyped by media, but the certainly has been exploited, particularly by Clinton administration.
Well, wait a minute then. I want to take a look at another one of the numbers from the poll that we talked about earlier and ask some of the other gentlemen to comment on it. On the question of are anti-Japanese feelings on the rise or decline. 4 years ago, 65% of Americans said anti-Japanese feelings were rising. Today, that's dropped to 23%. Mr. Vogel, how would you account for that?
Well, that was a special time. That was just after Prime Minister Hosokawa came to Washington, and there were a lot of people. I'm sorry, you said 4 years ago.
Right. This was...
I think that in the late 80s, there was a tremendous rise in Japanese ability. They had loose money policy. They were buying things everywhere. They had a success rate at the time where everything the Japanese had entered in terms of industrial goods, they were on the way up.
So do you think that image that we just saw was more valid 4 years ago than it is now?
I think it burst about 1990. And I think since that time, we've gone the other way. And I think what happens with our press and our media is that we, in a way, exaggerate the current trends.
And on that point, Mr. Packard, actually, let me show you another poll number. 2 years ago, on the question of are U.S.-Japanese relations good or poor, 2 years ago, 38% said good, 58% poor. Now 53% say they're good, and only 42% poor.
That accords with everything I see from my students to meeting businessmen in Silicon Valley. The idea of Japan as a threat is gone, it's finished. But it depends who we're talking about now. If you're talking about a certain elite group and certain parts of the media that I think got hijacked by this bad image of Japan, it's not gone. And I think it has infiltrated into the White House. I think, as Tsurumi-san said, you're seeing it in some of the Clinton foreign policy, but I would argue that President Clinton has shown some capacity for growth, that this mission that he is currently making to East Asia is emphasizing what is important, and that is the security partnership.
Well, is it possible that the reason things have gotten better in terms of Americans' views is a result of the Clinton get tough policy on trade, that people think that maybe things are evening out?
I don't think so.
No.
I think it's the American people are too smart to be taken in by the baloney that was issued by the so-called revisionists in the 1980s.
I think 2 years ago when Prime Minister Hosokawa came, at that particular point, we both said no, we aren't going to reach an agreement, and that was the peak of negative reaction. I think after that, both sides realized we had to continue working with each other. We were partners in world activity, and that we were too interdependent, and just shouting and yelling at each other and pushing was not going to resolve very difficult issues that we had to work together with.
Is it also possible, as we saw in Chris Bury's piece, that American products have gotten better and we just don't feel so threatened?
Well, that's true too. But again, as George pointed out, just finally, that the elite groups and others realize that they've been kind of taken for a ride about this is the Japan phobia. But unfortunately, during all these years, the elitist phobia has now finally sinking down on what I call the mass level. Look at this current presidential election. Everybody's from Clinton, Dole, everybody trying to out Buchanan in terms of who is the toughest on Japan.
Yeah, but Yoshi, look what happened to Buchanan. He was soundly beaten almost everywhere he tried that.
But only because Dole became the more Buchanan than Buchanan on trade issues.
I don't see that in Dole at all. I think Dole values Japan as an ally.
I think there's a whole new fact on the horizon, that's the rise of China. I think the fact that China is now seen as a country that's going to be strong in 10 to 20 years is already encouraging a lot of the people who want to worry about some scare and how we had to rally against that scare to pull together. And in that new context, Japan is an ally, just as it was in the Cold War. And I think that's the current move.
Well, I want to talk about that question of are we creating yet another enemy, when we come back in just a moment.
I don't know, but it's been said, athlete's foot's as good as dead. Mighty Mike. No cooling action. Stops the itch and cools the burn. Penetrates to kill the germ. Athlete's foot, don't let it win. Stamp it out with Micah 10.
Morning, guys. Just when you think your diarrhea medicine is working, it can let you down. But you can count on Imodium AD to stop diarrhea, often in just one dose.
You should have stopped for Imodium AD.
One dose relief you can count on.
After years of building cages, we're about to let the animal out. Introducing the 850R from Volvo.
Tomorrow, if your kids have psychological problems, you don't need to feel guilty, but you can get them help. We'll show you how.
That's tomorrow
On Good Morning America.
Your 1x6s, your 1x10s, your 2x4s, and your 4x4s. A special oxide pure waterborne preservative driven deep into the wood. An almost indestructible building material. Perfect for decks, fences, sidings, barns, and changing to a pleasant driftwood color.
Roxy really knows her wood, so we'll let her show you how to build a deck or even a home. At Tualatin Valley Builder Supply, we'll help you do it right the first time.
Ever since I won the People's Choice Award, I've been, partying, but now the boss wants me to go back to work. So I told Mr. ABC when he gets me some free donuts and a separate dressing room for my buddy here, I'll be back.
Drew's back Wednesday after Ellen.
Drew, the bus is here!
Oh, coming, Mom.
As long as we're together, time can't touch us. Eternity, Calvin Klein.
Your gift with any $38 Eternity purchase at Meyer & Frank.
To prove our Kia could give a Toyota a run for its money, we conducted a little car chase, Hollywood style, for a grueling 100,000 miles. With a more powerful engine, we tailed that Corolla from heaven to hell to hellish, and did it at a price that starts at about 3,000 miles, which means we came in way under budget. And in Hollywood, well, that rarely happens. Kia, because it's about time everyone had a well-made car.
Get $600 cash back on a new Sophia.
And we're back again with Ezra Vogel, Yossi Sarumi, and George Packard. We were talking before the break about the trade relationship and whether the candidates this year have been drumming up an anti-Japanese view. I want to show you another number from this poll that we released tonight at Nightline, which is on the trade relationship. Does Japan practice fair trade with the U.S.? 2 years ago, yes, 16%. Today, only 24%. That one doesn't seem to have improved very much, regardless of what people's other attitudes about Japan are. Do you think maybe there's a certain amount of reality to that people don't think Japan's a fair trader because it isn't?
I think Americans, again, have got it right. Japan's market is not open enough. It's been opening up gradually, but much, much more needs to be done. Many Japanese know that. And what Ezra said about the Hosokawa visit, it was so tragic that we sort of stiff-armed him when he came, because he represents the elements of consumers and deregulation and so forth that Americans should be rooting for in Japan. And it's too bad we didn't figure out a way to work with him.
George, we shouldn't mix up two things. One is just whether Japan needs to open up more markets. Yes, indeed. But that doesn't mean just the United States can blame Japan's alleged closed market for the U.S. trade deficits, large part of it economic problems. Clinton's foolish obsession with a trade deficit with Japan have created very, very just the bad things for the United States. They have invited many special interest groups, companies, Kodak, Motorola, and others, to essentially dictate the U.S. trade policy. It took 3 incidents to start changing not only Clinton, but American public's elitist mind. China, and gang raping, American Marines gang raping of the girl in Okinawa and North Korea. They have suddenly forced the United States to realize that the United States' stake in the Pacific is much better than, well, much larger than making Japan as an enemy.
Well, and at the same time, I think we need to have Japan continue to open markets. We ought to press them for that, but we ought to make that the same way we do working with the Canadians or the British. And we ought to criticize. We're friends with them, and we ought to deal with it in a very straightforward way.
I agree, but to
I don't think we need to stop putting pressure on Japan on economic matters, but we ought to put that in the context of what we're now doing, of seeing it in the broad security relationship.
But Ezra, wouldn't you agree that there are different ways, better ways and worse ways of putting pressure on Japan?
I agree with that. I think there are many things that could have done better.
I would like to respond to your question about China, because China is going to make Japan seem to be and actually be a very important ally. And the big difference, are we creating a new enemy in China? I don't think so. I think China has the potential for great problems in East Asia, because simply they haven't figured out how to transfer power, never have. The Japanese, at the end of the day, are a democracy. They share the same values that we do politically, and so they are going to be in our camp for the very long haul.
But I think at the same time we work with the Japanese, we can also work with China. I think that we have to avoid putting China in the enemy camp. They've been very cooperative in the United Nations, in the World Bank, in the IMF, where they've been a participant. They've made great strides, and the trends are basically in the correct direction. We vastly underestimate the progress that's going on in China. We need to firm up the security relationship with Japan, but we don't need to make China an enemy.
Mr. Sarumi, there's some commentators who say that Japan is now bent out of shape because China, all the attention is going to China, and that instead of Japan bashing, that now we're doing Japan passing, that we're not paying any attention at all.
No, it's not. That isn't the issue. The issue is just the United States certainly has been dealing or negotiating with China over Japanese head. That's the notion of Japan passing it. There is some truth to it.
I don't think that's accurate. I think we've been
that's not
consulting
what you
very
didn't
closely
do
with
it.
Japan.
But the point is that another bad aspect of U.S.-Japan treaty is in the past, Japan has been blamed for free ride on defense, etc. As a result, just more than half of Americans believe the U.S.-Japan security treaty is for the benefit of Japan, not for the United States.
Well, it's true that we're asked to defend Japan, and Japan's not asked to defend the United States.
That's right.
But the Japanese in the last few years have contributed a lot. It's not a free ride,
is it?
I agree. The Japanese have contributed. Are now contributing about $5 billion a year.
Without American the logistical basis supports in Japan, even Gulf War and others would have been made difficult. So when you talk about Japan, Whether Japan has been a reliable ally, let's look at the facts. Even in terms of just the making Japanese bases available.
We're just about out of time here, and I'll let Mr. Packard have the last word since he hasn't gotten in here.
I think the Japanese are a reliable ally. The test, if you would like to have a test, which I don't want to have, but just try telling the Japanese we're going to pull out of Asia, and you would see the most gigantic reaction, popular and among elites. The Japanese want us there, and the fact is nobody else wants us to pull out either, not the Chinese, not the Koreans, not anyone in Southeast Asia. So that treaty has strong underpinning and is one we can live with some modifications of where the troops are.
And I think the United States is much more committed than most people realize.
Thank you all very much for coming in. Ezra Vogel, Yoshi Shirumi, and George Packard. I'll be back in just a moment.
CD changer, amplifier, 4 bookshelf speakers. Ordered by telephone on Cindy Reese's MasterCard. Delivered to 73 William Street. Does Cindy live at 73 William Street? Does anybody? MasterCard pioneered the Address Information Management Service. It helps secure transactions by making sure an address is legitimate. Not an abandoned warehouse. It can tell if someone lives there.
Nice place.
Although it can't say why.
Great neighborhood.
MasterCard. It's smart money.
Elle devient plus petite.
Ogni giorno la rete globale di computer.
To desu ka?
Pošperaj po dalekiej starej bibliotece.
Gerðu litlu búðina Savalins að smá fjölþjóðafyrirtæki.
Curioso? Vil IBM være hos dem?
Just plug in.
Kom ici, où y est.
There are all kinds of reasons we designed Ford Windstar to be so safe, with over 40 standard safety features, including dual airbags and anti-lock brakes. Reasons it received 5 stars, the highest possible rating in government crash tests, higher than any other minivan. In fact, there are so many reasons we designed Ford Windstar as safe as we did, it's impossible to pick our favorite one. Ford Windstar, now available with $1,000 cash back.
If you think a tin shed can hold up like a tough shed, you're in for a big surprise.
Tough Shed at 68th and I-84. Call 288-TOUGH, 288-TUFF.
Maybe it's because their frames are welded instead of bolted. Or because their decks are stamped from a single piece of steel. Or maybe it's the fact that they have the highest resale value in the industry.
Oh, hey, I always wanted one of these.
But the truth is, when people are asked what kind of lawn tractor they'd like as a gift,
Happy birthday, Dad.
most say the same thing.
Canby Rental and Equipment, Columbia Feed and Supply, and Watkins Tractor and Supply.
Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls are 1 victory away from an unprecedented 70 wins in a season. Tomorrow evening, they could break the record in Milwaukee. Nightline will be there with a special broadcast on the Bulls. That is, if they win. And if they don't, well, we'll have another broadcast for you. That's our report for tonight. I'm Cokie Roberts in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
If you wish a transcript or a video cassette version of this or any edition of Nightline, please call 1-800-913-3434.
Nightline is a presentation of ABC News. More Americans get their news from ABC News than from any other source.
ABC Tuesday. Tim just loves his mommy. Tilly discovers mother's dating.
It has been ages since I've spent time alone with a man.
Let's not go there.
Home Improvement followed by a special Drew Carey. ABC Tuesday.
Tom Dargan was an accomplished broadcaster of remarkable talent whose professional imperative was to serve the public need. I'm Rhonda Shelby of Channel 2 News. Once again, KATU is proud to offer the annual Thomas R. Dargan Scholarship. This award assists minority students of the Pacific Northwest in completing their education in broadcasting and communications. For an application or more information about the Thomas R. Dargan Minority Scholarship, write P.O. Box 2, Portland 97207.
Sometimes neighborhood